This white genocide thing is wild, right?
Everyone knows it's bullshit.
Where the hell is this story coming from?
These
Trump has thrown the South African ambassador out of the country.
It is an Israeli state with Palestinian homelands. That is the project that is being built.
Ebrahim Rasool, longtime critic of Israel.
Thank you so much for that. It feels to me like if you around with Israel, you'll find out what the consequences are. And you are a direct recipient of that. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I think that that's what it comes down to. No one has said it as succinctly as you have. They've used whole paragraphs to describe the consequences of taking on Israel, holding it accountable, and exposing its main sponsor, the United States. And so I think you're absolutely right.
A lot of people would say it is unfair for lack of a better word, an incredibly impoverished nation where a lot of people are living in informal settlements, their basic food requirements are not met, to now be the moral heavyweight and to take on the superpowers.
You see, there's a saying that the more you have to lose. And so, in a sense, Arab opulence has disabled their society from going for broke. And South African deprivation means that we have so little to lose. That for us, sacrifice is a daily occurrence. It's not an existential, once-in-a-lifetime decision or choice that you exercise. And so the point that I'm making is that because we know poverty and we know suffering, we recognize suffering in other people, and therefore we don't have too much to lose because we are impoverished.
It's an incredible responsibility though, isn't it? Because I mean, as a government, you're basically saying, we recognize apartheid is wrong, we fought against it, and we're going to do it again. And you know, in the words of Nelson Mandela, the South African people will never be free without the liberation of the Palestinian people. But in the same breath, there may be some black South African woman who's sitting in a township right now who's being directly impacted by the policies that the US are now inflicting, punishing on South Africa. And she might be thinking, well, I'm barely surviving here, and because we're trying to provide diplomatic assistance to a Palestinian several thousand kilometers away, my life is getting worse. How do you kind of reconcile that balance?
I think we always have to keep our finger on the pulse for a backlash.
A backlash?
A backlash. In the sense in which there are many who are alleging, particularly your Zionist organizations in South Africa, assisted by some of the evangelical churches in South Africa, to say that if your government, if our government, the South African government, changes its policy and withdraws from the International Court of Justice against Israel, then life may be better. So they're trying to extract that backlash. What we need to do is to always explain, to always compensate. And therefore, in a gathering where rich Muslim organizations come together, you've got to be able to say, let us reward the patience and the sacrifice of black South Africans who are being made to suffer because of the position we've taken on Gaza. Let us help them and be generous to them so that they never feel that their sacrifice is in vain.
And you would agree that South Africa is being punished for its position on this genocide?
There's no doubt about it. Wherever I was in Washington, when I speak about trade relations, when I speak about tariffs, when I speak about investments, invariably the answer is, we will not speak about economics unless you drop your case in the ICJ. So they made it an absolute condition for the way in which they will deal with South Africa. And they add a few other issues like this alleged confiscation of white Afrikaner land, alleged genocide of whites. everyone knows it's bullshit, to borrow from your dictionary. Everyone knows it's bullshit, but it's a narrative that is driven as the kind of veneer for punishing South Africa for its principled stance.
This white genocide thing is wild, right? Like, you've had in both Trump's first presidency and second presidency, this idea established that white South Africans are systematically being targeted in farm murders and the like. Yet the statistics don't show that white South Africans are disproportionately impacted by crime more than any other race in South Africa, which is not to undermine that violent crimes happen on farms. They do. It just doesn't seem to be systematic. Where the hell is this story coming from?
I think the story is out of the need of white supremacists to justify their supremacism by pointing to white suffering. So for you to say we are being supremacist about white rights in America and in Germany and Nigel Farage's Britain, we need to point to a white community that is ostensibly victims of black policies. And along comes a coterie of white South Africans all around Donald Trump in the White House, led by Elon Musk, and they say, we've got the perfect victims for you. They're white Afrikaners. And so they suck statistics out of their thumb that white land is being confiscated. And so what do? They turn a 7% community who owns 72% of the land and almost all the mines.
So 7% of the country's white people,
Yes,
and they own 72%
of the land.
That's wild.
And they spin that so creatively.
So that they become the victims.
So that they become the victims. And at the same time, I can tell you the suburb I grew up in Cape Town, Manenberg, has more deaths over a weekend to crime than white farmers in a month. And so the idea of a genocide, of all things, why throw out the idea of white genocide if not at the same time to try and counteract the idea of South Africa charging Israel with genocide in Gaza?
So like,
it's diabolical.
Yeah, even within South Africa though, you'll hear white South Africans that are like, oh my God, it's going to become the next Zimbabwe, they're taking our land. And while there is a conversation about redistribution of land, which seemingly has to happen because this land was stolen from 1913 onwards and never given back, it's almost like an impossible situation for me. I don't think government can afford to buy back the country from white people. They can't seemingly take it all back in mass. And yet you end up with a native population of black South Africans that are effectively squatting in their own land. It seems like an impossible scenario.
No, absolutely. Yusuf, I was at a garage the other day filling my car with petrol, and the black petrol attendants all came, hey, Comrade Rasool, you really showed Trump, eh? And then one of them said, but you know what? If we are being punished for stealing their land, shouldn't we just take the land? We're already being punished. So you see, the point that I'm making is that the South African government must begin to wonder, and particularly the African National Congress, must begin to wonder our patient transformation over 30 years in which we have tried to be orderly, we've tried not to disrupt the stock markets, we've tried not to disrupt food security, we've tried not to disrupt a white community too deeply. Has it been worth it? If the moment a white messiah enters the White House, suddenly they turn to this white messiah and they say, punish these
It seems like there's a whole group of the white South Africans in America that have got an agenda against South Africa. They call them the PayPal Mafia.
No, I mean, that's exactly who they are. The tech bros that we are speaking about have a core of South Africans at their heart. But
why do they hate South Africa so much?
You see,
they benefited so much from it. They got their education from there. They got their white privilege from there. Why do they hate South Africa so much? Why are they going after you?
You see, Can someone who has gained the economy, can they reconcile and overcome their grieving for the loss of political power? Can you live an ordinary life when you were the pharaoh?
So you're saying
of
it's
your
like
time?
a great, make America great again. It's the same thing in South Africa. It's a notion of like back in the days we were
So
we were the
it's
master
that
and slave.
nostalgia,
The
about
nostalgia
the
for
good old
dominance.
days when we were the masters, they were the slaves.
Yeah.
You can gain the whole economy, but all the money in the world can never compensate for your loss of status, that you were the boss, you were the boss, you were the master. And so the point is that you have not only the four in the PayPal mafia, there are 83,000 mostly white families in the USA, disproportionately richer in relation to your average American, disproportionately bigger houses than your average American, disproportionately highly educated than your average American, but never having the satisfaction.
How sad.
It's a sad situation. It's pathetic. They are never satisfied with the kind of life that they are leading, simply because their hearts are still in South Africa. Their Springbok rugby team plays out of South Africa. Their favorite sports and musical icons are out of South Africa. They have a memory of their holiday house on the best beaches of South Africa that they've given up, not because they were pushed out, but because their fears dictated that they must get out of South Africa because of a swart gevaar, a black danger that will envelop them.
So they feel themselves as refugees. It's really, really, really interesting. Now, when we think about Palestine, some people think there is no chance of a one-state solution because they say, how could these two groups of people ever get along and live in the same nation? And the counter-argument is, well, look at South Africa. South Africa is the rainbow nation. It had truth and reconciliation. It forgave without a bloody massacre that so many people anticipated when black South Africans won their freedom. So that's the good case for South Africa. It's like, hey, you can have a peaceful transition to democracy, and that should set an example to Israel and Palestine. Having said that, the other voice that I hear is, well, what peace did South Africa win? People often I hear calling Nelson Mandela a sellout. They say, well, we won our right to vote, but we didn't win the economy. What lessons do you think we can learn as we look at the freedom of the Palestinians today, both the pros and cons of what South Africa achieved?
Just a quick throwaway line in response to the first part of your question.
Yeah.
The Economist has a cover that says something to the effect that for Trump, South Africa is a DEI country, a diversity, equity, and inclusion country.
That's awesome, no?
That's our laboratory. It's imperfect. We haven't transformed fast enough because we did not want to create turbulence in the plane. And we haven't gone after the white community. We've reconciled with them and had all kinds of ways in which to do the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in order to win the big prize of coexistence.
Unity.
I wouldn't call it unity, but it's a fairly united nation that works with great odds against it. But the fact of the matter is that this is the DEI that must be destroyed to propagate the myth that black and white can never coexist, that people of differences can never coexist, that Israeli and Palestinian can never coexist, that Jew and Arab can never coexist, because this has to be the central myth that destroys the idea of a one state. And our two-state solution in South Africa was between not geographies, but our two-state was who has the majority share in the economy and who has the majority share in the politics. And we've always understood as the ANC that occupying the political space is the precondition for eventually occupying the economic space as well. We may have gone about it in a tardy way. So the two-state solution that we would historically have supported in Israel was a geographical one, but the facts on the ground that the Israelis promised have become so overwhelming that they have made it a competition between what one-state solution must exist. And so there is the desired one of a cheddar cheese one-state solution in which there's just a full democracy, one person, one vote, human rights for all, equal citizenship for everyone who lives in that land. Or there is the Israeli fact on the ground that is the Swiss cheese. It is an Israeli state with Palestinian homelands. That is the project that is being built.
The Bantustans.
The Bantustans. And so at this point, it looks like the two-state solution has been shut out of the water. The cheddar cheese,
Looks like a cancer spreading.
and the holes in the Swiss cheese
Become unlivable.
are smaller and unlivable. Its olive groves are not allowed to. The water has been diverted away from it. Livelihoods have become completely fraught within it. And so, unfortunately, I believe that is the reality.
That's really interesting. So you're basically saying if you want to understand Israel's vision for the future, you should actually look at apartheid South Africa's Bantustan system, where they basically took black South Africans and delegated them to small patches of land, which sometimes were not even where they were from, and said, hey, you go over here now, and you can have that's yours.
No, that's exactly what it is, except that there wasn't always the perniciousness that went with it, the cruelty that went with it by taking away the water sources, making the land untillable, removing the olive groves. It is eventually a strategy of decanting the Palestinians to the neighboring Arab states.
Yeah, whereas at least the white South Africa still wanted the blacks there just to work for them.
Absolutely.
They said, we want to keep you alive so you can be my domestic worker.
Absolutely.
Now, on a separate point, I think the best country in the world to be Muslim, if you want freedom of religion, freedom of expression, is South Africa. It's not an Arab country.
Yeah.
You have more ability to practice your Islam in South Africa, including LGBTQI mosques, if that's what you're into, or any form of the religion. You can have the call to prayer out loud. There's tons and tons of halal food. I don't think people realize what a crazy good country South Africa is for Muslims, considering they only make up like 2% of the population.
Almost every mosque in Cape Town has a Palestinian flag
so you got wild
next to its
freedom
member.
You got
Try
wild,
wearing
wild.
a Palestinian cap into the haram.
So you got wild freedom of expression in South Africa for Muslims that they wouldn't be able to enjoy in much of the Middle East, including supporting Palestine. It feels like a lot of that strength and owning space comes off the back of a generation of Muslim community leaders, political leaders, the Ahmed Katraras of the world, yourself, who were so active. And today, when I look at my generation, I don't see much of it. And I just wonder whether Muslims in South Africa, who've got such a good thing, think that it's always going to be there and are kind of taking it for granted.
I think my fear is that the freedom that my generation and preceding generations like Ahmed Katrad and others fought for are not just taken for granted. I believe that there is a malignant strain entering that community where they use the freedom of expression that we won to be the freedom to excommunicate other Muslims that they disagree with, to takfir them, to call them kafir. The freedom that we fought for with Desmond Tutu and others next to us from other faiths, they use to insult other religions. That you can't say Merry Christmas because you are engaged in kufr and shirk, and all of those kind of things. So I think South Africa has to have a hard look at itself, and therefore, when you have on the one hand, a main rump of Muslims standing up for Palestine, persuading the government of South Africa that we are with you in taking Israel to the ICJ, there are other Muslims that are wittingly or unwittingly complicit in a backlash, in which blacks say, if they insult our Christmas, if they insult our Hindu culture, why should we be supporting their causes? And they then open up the minds.
So you think Muslims are becoming right-wing, basically?
I think that there's enough of it. I mean, the rate at which your more kind of Salafi Muslim muftis and sheikhs and imams are condemning others for standing next to a Christian priest on the steps of St. George's Cathedral, the way in which they focus on someone who is in a church where a particular hymn is sung, and then condemning them and saying, these are, let's call him Reverend Baum now at this moment. I mean, that's a misuse of the freedom that was won with the blood, sweat and tears of thousands of black South Africans and hundreds of Muslim South Africans in the days of apartheid.
I think a lot of people give the ANC a lot of cuck, and some of it is due around corruption and lack of service delivery, but also credit where credit's due. Like, if at the end of the day you believe in morality, well played. Like, going up against not just Israel, but going up against the West amidst this genocide. Say all you want about corruption and all these allegations. What is more corrupt than dropping 2,000-pound bombs on civilian populations? So, yeah, I think, several decades after Mandela's death, his grandchildren still hold on to some core values, which are quite beautiful, aren't they?
No, absolutely. And so the point is that this democracy, freedom and human rights that the ANC brought to South Africa has proven to be vulnerable. And it just needed a high priest like Jacob Zuma to ride a bus through it and to bring in a family who captured the state and who stole the resources and everything like that. But the ability to try and self-correct, that the Constitution Mandela gave us was the means to self-correct. The freedom that journalists had was the freedom to investigate without fear and favor. The power of the judiciary. Even the United States judiciary can't stand up to Trump today, but our judiciary stood up to the president and called him corrupt. The activism that Mandela and them built into the core of our society is an activism that can't be exercised in the United States as they abduct the activists and deport them from Louisiana. Now, you see, the DNA is so strong that when damage is done, the DNA allows for self-correction. But unfortunately, there are Muslims who value the damage of the pothole in their road far more than the crater that is in Gaza.
Looping back to the start of this interview, just so people that are international and that may not have context, you were literally kicked out of America basically by a mixture of Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
Yeah, but the hand that did it was Marco Rubio. So the point of the matter is, yes. And I wasn't even crude and rude. I was doing an analysis of white supremacism as a phenomenon that is the driving agenda of what we are seeing in the world. The reason that our Afrikaners are being given refugee status, a way in which deportations are happening with brown people.
So wait, America announces that they're going to allow white refugees to come to America because they believe that they are being massacred in South Africa, and you're doing an analysis and study of this, and that offends them?
I mean, that's the point. That is the intriguing thing, that someone who reserves for themselves the right to insult and humiliate, even as Zelensky in the White House, feels offended when you do a critical analysis of the phenomenon of supremacy. Speak about putting on the shoe. Someone who operates with no rules wants to apply the rules of diplomacy to an ambassador. Someone who dishes it out can't take it. And so that is what then leads to one ambassador of over 200 who, fortunately, gets heard in the White House, and then, unfortunately, gets declared a persona non grata, an unwelcome person.
Damn it, I've just realized sharing this interview with you, I'm going to lose my US visa. So I want to thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much.